So, sir, thanks for coming on the podcast. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm Sir Wade Neistadt. I'm a 3D character animator and content creator, YouTube person who makes stuff about animation on the internet to try and help people learn animation, make the field more accessible, and overall just make cool stuff.
Love that. I was curious too, like growing up, did you always want to be in a creative career, or was it something that you kind of fell into later on?
Definitely fell into it. I was a computer science major in college, which I didn't finish, dropped out to do animation. But growing up, I always thought, well, my first everything, I want to be an inventor and then things like that. But when I first picked like career things, it was going to be an engineer because that's what made money. And I was just kind of on that track for a long time and didn't realize creative jobs were a real thing. I was in my mid 20s when I remembered this like core memory from when I was really young. Like, oh, I wanted to make games at one point, but I didn't know what that meant. I was just like, oh, I love video games. I wish I could like make those. Okay, well, it's not like people make video games. I guess I'll just go find engineering or something. But anyway, all of this stuff is new to me in terms of like I never thought I would fall into it because I didn't know it existed.
I guess like with your parents, like were they pretty supportive of whatever you did? I guess is like one way to start the conversation here.
Absolutely. When I decided to do animation, it was in this longer story of how there was a short film competition in my college. They went around the country going to schools in the US and, hey, here's a camera, here's a week, make a movie. And mine was luckily not up against very many other good films, so it ended up winning a bunch of the awards. And then I went to the Cannes Film Festival to show it and learn about the industry and all these things. And so I was there realizing like, oh, film, movies, game, like I can do all this stuff. So I called my parents at like 3 a.m. my time. So for them, it's like 8 a.m. and like, hey, I think I'm going to drop out of school and do film. And they were just kind of like, okay, well, come up with a plan and do that plan. I was like, okay, I will. So they've always been super supportive. My dad's an entrepreneur, so the risk factor is not really too big a deal in our family.
Got it. No, that's great because obviously I'm sure you're well aware with people you interact with that, again, like art or animation is always kind of seen as an unstable career or not a real career at all. And in general, engineering is kind of one of those safe bets that it's like go do this thing and then go get a job. And I think a lot of people never actually kind of crosses their mind to actually do something that they enjoy versus something that they're actually passionate about.
I think that's been at the core of my parents have always been really good about pushing us. I have 2 younger sisters. All 3 of us have been encouraged to do things that we enjoy and that make us happy as long as there's kind of a hope for a future, even if it's just one that we perceive and other people don't really know about it. Like, well, as long as you think there's a plan, you can keep going. Because my parents also recognize that like normal jobs are still there. So it's not like this is a path you can never come back from or something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm curious too, and by the way, very modest, mentioning that, there were no other good films, unfortunately. So I, won and went to Cannes. What was that experience like? Was it quite reconfirming that this is a potential career that you could go down, having both created something, but then also the reception of it being so well received?
It was definitely a shock. I did not expect to even finish the movie, first of all. Like when I joined this little thing, it was like, I think it was, hey, make a short film and you could win a 1-year subscription to Adobe Creative Cloud, back when that was first a thing. And I was like, whoa, I can't afford that. That'd be great. And so, they even gave you like loaner laptops for the week. And it was my first time opening After Effects and following tutorials and trying to put the shatter plug in to blow open a wall. And that whole thing was really the beginning of my, I guess, what would you call it, functional understanding of any type of visual effects. Because at the time I was struggling to figure out like what I had learned a little bit about animation that it existed, character animation, and I learned about visual effects, both from the ILM Behind the Magic, like 2011, 2012 Battleship and Avengers breakdowns, and they're showing all the layers and compositing, and I was like, what the heck? How do I do that? And I hadn't figured out where you go to learn those things. And so when this competition came along, it was like, oh, I could make a movie, I could do those things. And then I realized it's a lot harder than it seems in those breakdown videos. So when it started to go and win stuff and bring me into this world, it was definitely there was a sense of like, oh, I'm home. Like I can be creative and do these things that were always just kind of these side projects and procrastination tactics from my actual work. Like, oh, I can do those things as things I'm supposed to do. That's awesome. But then seeing how much work it was also exciting because I like learning stuff. And so it was like, oh, I know nothing. I can't wait to learn more things. And it was just, I don't know, it was encouraging to know that that was a path that I could jump onto and not be, quote unquote, procrastinating on what I'm supposed to be doing, but that could just be part of the journey.
I love that. And I'm curious too, like, what was your first paid gig in the industry?
DreamWorks. I was very fortunate. So when I dropped out of regular school, computer science, I went to Animation Mentor, the online animation school.
Yeah, I'm good friends with Charles Boehner and all the other guys there. They're great.
Yeah, they're fantastic. And I signed up over the summer. And it was funny because I signed up for like Creatures because I saw How to Train Your Dragon 2 at the big red carpet premiere. That's the movie that clicked for me. That was like, oh, that's what I want to do. Because I'm sitting like 8 rows behind Dean and Simon and all these people who made the film. And that's how I drew the connection of like, oh, they made this. I want to go where they are. They're at DreamWorks. I'm going to work at DreamWorks. I heard this is a trilogy. I want to work on the third one. Which I didn't expect to actually happen, but I drop out of school, jump into Animation Mentor. I sign up for the Creatures, like flight dragon stuff, and they call me like a week later, the admissions people, like, hey, nice to meet you. Do you have any experience? No? Maybe you should start at the beginning. Like, oh, there's a beginning? Sure. Yeah, put me there. And so go through the program, and it was based on a bunch of other stuff I had done, like, when I was in college for computer science, I was a STEM center tutor, and my dad being an entrepreneur, like I used to sell websites, and so I have ties with like chambers of commerce, and so all these random things that I had done, like, oh, I made this like Microsoft Office training thing to pay rent a couple of months in LA because I was out of money and I had quit my job at Best Buy to do animation and had $27. Rent was due in 11 days. I was like, oh, I should start a business real quick and like make rent, and so I started teaching Office, and so all these other pieces plus the animation side ended up getting me the experience I needed to land a job at DreamWorks in the training department. So my first job was at DreamWorks as a trainer right out of Animation Mentor, where I was there for 2 years, and when I started the YouTube channel. So that was my kind of first thing. I think I got hired at 21 years old to DreamWorks, which was really cool and really terrifying, and definitely led to a lot of imposter syndrome and insecure conversations with my boss of like, why did you hire me?
Yeah, no, I think that's so cool, and it's also one that I think most people, they're not even going to think to go to their at the time dream job until later on. They think that, well, I've got to go and cut my teeth on a bunch of other things for 10 years first, and maybe then I'll be worthy. How often do you see that or feel like that's a common thing to happen, where people delay going after what they really want, whether it is like, I'm going to go to college just because it's meant to be the thing that you do for 4 years and then go off, and it's only once they get in the industry that they realize like, shit, I'd be 4 years further into my career and way less in debt if I just started, rather than thinking that this is the traditional path to go on.
Yeah, I feel like I see that constantly. I just spoke at a school like a week and a half ago, and every single person in the class, there were probably like 50, or it's like a student-run organization. They all came together and did this thing, and there's probably 50 or 60 kids. And I was talking about my journey and my path, like, oh yeah, I dropped out, this and that. And like, what are you guys gonna do? We were talking after, and almost every single one of them was like, yeah, I'm in debt now, or I spent all this money, or I'm gonna probably have to go to some finishing school, I have to go to this program or do a workshop or do this or this or this, because none of us are ready to get jobs. And I feel like that's extremely common, unfortunately, that pretty much almost I don't want to say everyone, but a lot of people that I talk to in schools, very few of them come out ready to get hired. They're no fault of their own. It's just they expect that they're going to go pay all this money and then learn what they need to get hired, when in reality they're just going to go and learn like a broad overview that they could have gotten on their own, and then they realize that after they've already spent the money and spent the 4 years. And
yeah,
I don't know, it's very unfortunate.
Also, like, some people have major fear of failure, but then there's people who have fear of success as well. Like Connolly over at Film Riot, like we've talked about this, where I think that there are a lot of people who will intentionally delay doing something because what if I actually do get to my dream job and I screw it all up, or whatever it is. There's in some ways, people aren't seeking education. They're just seeking, delaying everything so that way they don't need to execute on that thing just in case they do fail or they do get it. And then what if? Because, yeah, as you mentioned before about imposter syndrome, like that is a thing that a lot of us will wrestle with. And I've been doing this 26 years. I've been doing 3D for almost 30. And yeah, like there's definitely times that I still wrestle with that from time to time. I mean, it's never a thing that goes away. It's just more about like, why am I feeling this way, and more leaning into it rather than running away from it.
Yeah, no, you're right though. That's definitely, I feel like I've done that. I mean, I'm sure I've done that lots more than I can think of at the moment off the top of my head.